So I want you to just take a second and imagine walking into like a modern spiritual wellness center. I mean, you know the exact vibe I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah. The ethically sourced Palo Santo smell.
Exactly. You expect the Palo Santo, you expect like soft ambient music playing in the background, maybe some gentle restorative yoga going on, and definitely an aesthetic that leans heavily into, Lululemon pastels.
Right. Very clean, very safe.
Very safe.
Yeah.
Because we expect spirituality to be soft. But now take that image and just completely shatter it. Imagine walking into a temple where the central figure of devotion is honestly a terrifying goddess.
Right.
I mean, she is wearing a necklace made of freshly severed human heads. She has a skirt made of dismembered human arms. She's holding a dripping sword, and she is literally standing on a corpse.
It's jarring.
It is incredibly jarring. But believe it or not, these are both modern representations of the exact same ancient practice.
Which is, it is the ultimate contradiction because we have this deep-seated cultural assumption, especially in the West, that spiritual practice must inherently be peaceful. It has to be orderly and, above all, palatable.
Right, something you can put on Instagram.
Exactly. So the moment we encounter something visceral, something that puts death and destruction front and center, our conditioning immediately flags it as evil or dark or even demonic. We just lose our minds over the aesthetic and completely miss the science underneath it.
And that is exactly why I am so glad you are joining us today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking a full-on swan dive into that exact contradiction today. We are exploring one of the most shadowy, highly misunderstood corners of human psychology and spiritual practice, which is tantra.
It's a massive topic.
It really is.
Yeah.
And our mission today is to completely dismantle the extreme misconceptions you probably have about it. We want to move way past the commodified Western idea of like glossy sexual wellness.
Yeah.
And we want to tear down the terrifying Eastern myth of satanic black magic.
And, it is a necessary dismantling because if you look at the historical context, the sanitization of this practice began a really long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Right.
think back to the British occupation of India. You had these Victorian British officers arriving with deeply repressed, highly orderly Protestant sensibilities. They walked into these temples, saw a goddess drinking blood, and their immediate reaction was, this is the work of the devil. They literally couldn't process it.
Because religion, at least to the colonial mindset, was supposed to be polite.
Yeah.
You sit in the pew, you read a book, you sing a hymn, and you go home. It's safe. It's boxed in.
Safe and hierarchical. But the raw indigenous practices of the East, they were designed to confront the messy, chaotic energies of life directly. And this clash of civilizations is actually documented brilliantly in some of the foundational texts that brought Eastern thought to the West.
Right, like Yogananda.
Exactly. If you look at Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, or even earlier, the lectures of Swami Vivekananda when he came to the World Parliament of Religions back in 1893, they were constantly trying to translate this highly advanced internal science for an audience that only understood religion as outward dogma.
They had to bridge a massive gap.
Huge. Vivekananda in particular, he stressed that true spirituality must make you fearless. And, well, you cannot be fearless if you are hiding from the darker aspects of reality.
Which brings us directly to our source material for today. To unpack all of this, we are looking at a deeply fascinating transcript and profile of a really unique guide. His name is Osman, and he is widely known as the blind Muslim yogi.
And his background is fascinating.
It really is. And right out of the gate, I want to give you some context on him because it's vital for everything we're about to talk about. You might notice if you go to his videos, and he has a fantastic YouTube channel, by the way, just called The Blind Muslim Yogi, that he uses incredibly vivid, highly visual language to describe energy and the cosmos.
Yeah, he talks about colors and shapes a lot.
Exactly. And that is because Osman only became permanently blind recently, in May of 2023. He had full eyesight as a normal person for his entire life prior to that. So he's pulling from a lifetime of visual memory to explain these energetic concepts.
And his background is really what makes this entire exploration so credible. I mean, Osman isn't just some philosopher reading old Sanskrit texts in a library. He is a master-level bioenergy healer.
Right.
He specializes in critical care, extreme recovery, and terminal illnesses. And he has been practicing yoga, meditation, and healing at an elite advanced level for 50 years. He actually attained his first state of samadhi, which is a profound state of superconsciousness, when he was just 19 years old.
19. That is wild. And he has studied everywhere, right? The Far East, the Middle East, the West. He's synthesized all of it. But the source video we are analyzing today centers around a bold, frankly shocking question that Osman answers head-on. And that question is Tantra part of satanic rituals?
It's such a provocative question because the source material doesn't hide the darker history. Osman openly discusses that in specific older lineages, he mentions the ancient cults of the 64 yoginis, there are historical accounts of extreme rituals involving cremation grounds and, the decapitation of dead bodies.
Okay, right, which, I mean, my brain immediately throws up red flags.
Yeah.
Even reading the transcript, I was like, wait, how do you defend decapitating a dead body? The source notes this was done with the permission of the deceased's family, usually to use the skull as an energetic vessel, but it still sounds objectively evil. I mean, how is that not satanic?
And this is where we really have to separate the packaging from the product.
Yeah.
Osman introduces a framework that completely shifts how we evaluate spiritual tools.
Yeah, I call it the scary spoon logic.
Yes, the spoon analogy.
So imagine someone hands you a spoon, but this spoon is carved out of a human femur, and the handle is shaped like a screaming skull. It looks terrifying. But Osman asks, if it looks like a scary spoon and acts like a scary spoon, is it still a spoon? Yes, because its ultimate function is to hold liquid. Its function is to deliver nourishment.
Right.
We have this fatal human instinct to judge a practice entirely by its aesthetic conditioning, the way the spoon looks, rather than understanding the functional intent behind it.
Exactly. We mistake the intense visual metaphor for literal violence. But to understand why the visual metaphor is so intense in the first place, we have to understand the landscape Osman operates in. He maps out the universe in a very specific three-tiered cosmology.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Think of existence as a massive skyscraper. We're currently living in the middle world, this physical reality.
The lobby. Waking up, drinking coffee, paying taxes.
Right. The everyday grind. Above us are the higher worlds, the penthouse. And below us are the lower worlds, the basement. And the basement is where Osman's descriptions get pretty wild. He talks about entities that live in these lower frequencies. Bhutas, Pisachas, Rakshasas, and Asuras. Historically, we just translate these as demons.
Okay, stop right there, because I need to push back hard on this. When you say demons, my rational 21st century brain pictures a chaotic cloud of evil floating around looking to possess a teenager in a horror movie. But Osman describes these lower worlds as a bureaucracy.
Yes, a literal system.
He talks about demon politics. He claims these entities have borders, social structures, legal systems, and leaders. I mean, are we speaking metaphorically about human psychology here, or does Osman literally believe he is dealing with interdimensional entities with filing cabinets? Because I am losing you.
It is a massive leap for the rational mind, I agree. But let's ground this by looking at how modern public intellectuals are circling this exact same concept, because Osman isn't alone in this assertion at all. Think about the conversations happening on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Oh yeah, Rogan goes deep into this.
Exactly. In Joe Rogan's episode with Graham Hancock, they dive deep into how ancient civilizations universally reported interacting with highly intelligent non-human entities through altered states. And then look at Rogan's episode with Dr. Rick Strassman, who conducted the first U.S. government-approved DMT research.
The spirit molecule guy.
Yes. Strassman's clinical trial patients consistently reported entering alternate dimensions populated by intelligent beings who had their own agendas and hierarchies. They weren't just hallucinations, they felt like real structured worlds. Even in Rogan's episode with Paul Stamets, they discussed the mycelium network as a conscious planetary intelligence. The idea of overlapping intelligent dimensions is rapidly moving from fringe mysticism into serious speculative science.
Okay, so you're saying Osman's lower worlds might be the exact same alternate dimensions Strassman's DMT patients are visiting.
Exactly. And we see this explored heavily on the Beer Biceps podcast, too. Ranveer Alabaidia has done brilliant deep dives into this exact overlap. In Ranveer's episode with Sadhguru, they explicitly discuss the mechanics of disembodied beings and how they attach to human compulsions.
Wow.
And then in his interview with Dr. Robert Svoboda, who was the first Westerner to graduate as an Ayurvedic physician, they talk extensively about the Agora path and the reality of negotiating with spirits in cremation grounds. It's highly technical. And in his episode with Abhijit Chavda, they explore how ancient Indian history wasn't just mythology, but a documented record of multidimensional physics.
So what Osman calls a bureaucracy is really just his way of explaining that these lower dimensions have rules of physics and laws of energy, just like our dimension does.
Right. They aren't just chaotic clouds, they operate on a system.
So if there are laws, there are loopholes. And Osman claims that as a healer, his job requires him to act as a sort of spiritual diplomat. When a client comes to him with a severe terminal illness or a heavy energetic curse, Osman lowers his own frequency, enters these lower portals, and basically bargains with these entities.
He negotiates the energetic exchange rate. It reframes exorcism completely. It's not, a priest throwing holy water and shouting. It's a complex legal negotiation in an alternate dimension.
Which brings me to the absolute biggest question I have about Osman's practice: the how. You mentioned he uses telepathic healing and the principles of quantum entanglement to do this remotely. How? I mean, how does a bioenergy healer sit in one room and manipulate the cellular biology or the spiritual attachments of a terminal patient across the world?
Well, we have to look at the physics of non-locality. In quantum mechanics, when two particles become entangled, altering the spin of one particle will instantaneously alter the spin of the other, even if they are light years apart.
Einstein called that spooky action at a distance, right?
Exactly. And Osman is asserting that human consciousness, the foundational energy of the mind, operates on this exact quantum level.
So he essentially entangles his cultivated, highly charged energy field with the depleted energy field of the patient.
Yes. And this maps perfectly onto the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza, who frequently appears on Lewis Howes's podcast, The School of Greatness. In Dispenza's episodes with Lewis, like the ones on unlocking the potential of the mind and the neuroscience of healing, he breaks down how focused intention, when combined with elevated emotion, creates a measurable electromagnetic field that can actually alter gene expression.
That is incredible.
Right. Now pair that with Wim Hof's episode on Lewis Howes's show, where Wim scientifically proves he can consciously control his autonomic nervous system to fight off injected endotoxins. Then look at Lewis's interview with Dr. Shefali Saberi on transcending the ego. If you strip away the ego, control the nervous system, and generate a massive electromagnetic field, you have the exact mechanics of energy healing that Osman is using.
And Osman has been practicing this for 50 years. He talks about how, in certain stages of his life, he was doing rigorous yoga and meditation practices for up to 18 hours a day. 18 hours.
It's unfathomable discipline.
And even now, he practices a minimum of 8 to 10 hours a day just to, as he puts it, sharpen the sword.
That phrase is everything, sharpening the sword, because the healer's internal battery is the medicine. When someone consults Osman for a terminal illness, they aren't paying for an hour of his time. They are paying for the 50 years of accumulated voltage. They are paying for the thousands of hours he spent building the energetic capacity to entangle with their system and blast through a blockage.
Right.
This is exactly why he has such a high success rate, and it's why his treatments and consultation fees are not inexpensive. It is a premium, master-level intervention.
But I love that he includes a massive ethical disclaimer, because Osman is very clear about this. His services are complementary. They are not a replacement for medical treatment. He is enhancing what the medical field might be missing energetically, but he absolutely respects physical medicine.
Which gives him immense credibility. It bridges the gap between the mysticism of, say, Deepak Chopra's quantum healing and the grounded biological realities we all have to face.
Okay, so what does this all mean? If Osman is diving into the basement to fight off these lower entities, where does Tantra fit in? I mean, if Tantra uses skulls and swords, is it part of that demonic bureaucracy?
Osman's answer is a massive, unequivocal no. This is the core paradigm shift of our deep dive today. Tantra does not exist in the lower worlds.
The address is strictly penthouse. Tantra exclusively resides in the higher worlds. Osman is adamant that engaging with these terrifying goddesses, the Mahavidyas, pulls your energy up. It raises your consciousness.
He defines satanic practice as anything that actively engages with the entities below the root chakra, the entities that feed on human suffering and compulsion. Tantra is the exact opposite. It is a transcendental vector.
It's like the bouncer at an exclusive club. If you walk up to a club and the bouncer is 7 feet tall, covered in scars, and holding a battle axe, your first thought is, oh man, this is a violent, evil place. But the bouncer isn't there to hurt the guests. The bouncer is there to keep the chaos out. The ferocity of the tantric goddesses is a protective mechanism. That goddess holding a sword isn't holding it to hurt you, she's holding it to cut your attachments.
We see this exact theme explored beautifully by Rainn Wilson on the Soul Boom podcast. Rainn is constantly wrestling with the messy reality of spirituality. In his episode with Reza Aslan, they discuss how the history of religion is filled with terrifying metaphors that got taken literally by the masses.
Right, people confuse the map for the territory.
Exactly. And then in Rainn's chat with Dr. Lisa Miller on the science of spirituality, they look at how the brain actually requires moments of intense structural breakdown, which feels terrifying, to achieve true spiritual renewal. And perhaps most relevantly, in Rain's interview with the Franciscan friar Richard Rohr, they discuss the concept of falling upward. How the darkest, most terrifying parts of our shadow selves are actually the necessary fuel for our spiritual ascent.
Which brings us to the absolute masterpiece of Osman's framework. Because these cosmic addresses, the basement, the middle world, the penthouse, they aren't just floating out in deep space. Osman maps them directly onto the human nervous system. We were talking about the chakras. And this isn't some generic, spin the colored wheels yoga class. This is biohacking the soul.
Exactly. Osman breaks down how each terrifying goddess represents a highly specific, necessary physiological and psychological state. Let's walk through this map because it is profound. Starting from the ground floor, the root chakra, the Muladhara.
Right at the base of the spine.
Yeah.
And Osman associates the root with the goddess Kamalatnika. And surprisingly, she is very gentle. She is beautiful, seated on a lotus. She represents the earth element.
Because the root is your bedrock. It is your fundamental right to exist. It represents stability, physical survival, and grounding. You simply cannot build a skyscraper if the foundation is crumbling.
This makes me think of the Mel Robbins podcast. Mel's entire philosophy is rooted in foundational physical action. I mean, in her episodes discussing the 5-second rule, she is basically teaching people how to activate their root chakra. When you are paralyzed by anxiety, you count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you physically move your body.
Right, you get out of the mind and into the body.
Exactly. And in Mel's episode with Dr. Russell Kennedy on somatic healing, they discuss how anxiety isn't in the mind, it's trapped in the body. It's a survival mechanism gone wrong. And in her interview with Dr. Amy Shaw about exhaustion, the focus is entirely on circadian rhythms, sunlight, and basic biological grounding.
That is a perfect modern parallel. Mel Robbins is teaching root chakra survival mechanics. But once you have the right to exist, you must move up. The energy rises to the sacral chakra, the Svadhisthana. This is the center of raw emotion, untamed creativity, and sexuality. Osman links this to the goddess Matangi.
And Matangi is known in the text as the outcast goddess. She's associated with the fringes of society, untamed art, and weirdly enough, pollution.
Because, true, raw creative flow cannot be boxed in by polite society. Polite society demands neatness. It demands that we suppress our deep, visceral, messy, emotional drive so we can just, sit quietly in an office cubicle.
Right.
Matangi represents the unapologetic reality of human passion. To the repressed mind, untamed emotion looks like pollution. To the tantric practitioner, it is pure, potent fuel.
This maps so perfectly onto the conversation Stephen Bartlett has on The Diary of a CEO.
Oh, totally.
Stephen has this incredible knack for getting hyper-successful people to admit how messy their internal lives are. Look at Stephen's episode with Dr. Gabor Mate. Mate explains that all trauma is essentially the suppression of our authentic, raw emotions to maintain attachment to society or our parents. We suppress the Matangi energy to fit in. And Stephen's episode with Mo Gaddad on solving happiness proves that intellectual formulas completely fail if we don't address our raw emotional baselines. And of course, Stephen's legendary interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza completely revolves around how unexpressed emotional energy gets trapped in the lower energy centers, literally the sacral chakra, and causes physical disease.
Matangi forces you to look at the pollution of your own unprocessed trauma. She says, do not hide this. Feel it. And once you integrate that raw emotion, the energy surges up to the solar plexus, the Manipura chakra, the center of will and power. And here we meet Bagalamukhi. She is called the paralyzer.
Okay, the imagery here is wild. She is typically depicted holding a massive club in one hand and grabbing a demon's tongue with the other. And I have to push back again here. If Tantra is about raising consciousness, why is my power center ruled by a goddess inflicting blunt force trauma and ripping tongues out?
Because you have to ask who she's paralyzing. This is the brilliance of the psychology. Bagalamukhi is not attacking an external enemy. She is entirely internal. She is the physiological stop button for your own internal sabotage.
Oh, so the demon she is grabbing by the tongue is me.
It is the voice of self-doubt in your head. It is your imposter syndrome. It is the neurotic, endlessly chattering mind that drains your willpower right when you need to take action. Think about Tony Robbins and his concept of state change. When you procrastinate, when you tell yourself you aren't good enough, your energy is bleeding out through that internal noise. Bagalamukhi smashes that noise. She paralyzes the internal enemy so your will can finally operate with laser clarity.
That is profound. She is the ultimate protector of your potential. Which brings us to the heart chakra, the anahata. And I think this one absolutely shattered my worldview.
It's very counterintuitive.
It really is. Because when we think of the heart in the West, we think of Valentine's Day. We think of pink hearts. romance, expansiveness, and like green light. But Osman associates the heart with the goddess Dhumavati. And Dhumavati is depicted as an ugly, starving, grieving widow wearing dirty rags. Why on earth would you put a grieving widow at the center of the human heart? Because the Valentine's Day heart is a fragile, shallow heart. It is a heart that only accepts joy, romance, and positive vibes. But a heart that refuses to accept suffering is a heart that will break at the first sign of tragedy. Dhumavati represents the void. She represents profound loss, deep grief, and the incredible unconditional compassion that can only be born from surviving the absolute worst life has to offer.
The source text calls her the smoke that rises from the funeral pyre of the ego.
Let that sink in. You cannot have true, unconditional compassion for the suffering of humanity if you refuse to acknowledge the void within yourself. She is the spiritual maturity of the heart, the willingness to look directly at the darkest, saddest parts of human existence and find the divine right there in the ashes.
This connects directly to the neurobiology of grief that Professor Andrew Huberman discusses on the Huberman Lab podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Huberman explains that grief is essentially a neural map of attachment that suddenly has nowhere to go because the object of attachment is gone. The brain has to rewire itself around a void. In Huberman's episode on the neuroscience of grief, he explains just how painful that void physically is.
That's a biological ache.
Right. And then in Huberman's episode with Dr. Anna Lemke on dopamine, we learn that running away from the pain of that void leads directly to addiction. We try to fill the Dhumavati void with cheap hits of dopamine. And in Huberman's episode with Dr. Matthew Walker on sleep, we see how the subconscious mind desperately tries to process this emotional debt at night. Dhumavati isn't a monster. She is the neurobiological reality of a brain processing the loss of attachment.
Beautifully stated. And once the heart is cracked open by grief and compassion, the energy must be spoken. It moves up to the throat chakra, the Vishuddha, the bridge between the heart and the head. And this is where the visual shock value really peaks. The goddess here is Chinnamasta. She is the self-decapitating goddess.
Okay, if you see a painting of Chinnamasta, she is standing there holding her own severed head in her hand while 3 streams of blood spurt from her neck into the mouths of her attendants and her own severed head. My modern brain screams, gore, horror movie, shut it down.
But look at the anatomy of the metaphor. What is the function of the throat chakra? It is communication. It is the expression of pure truth. And what is the single biggest obstacle to you expressing pure, unadulterated spiritual truth?
My brain, my intellect, my overthinking, neurotic, ego-driven, calculating mind that constantly filters everything I say to make sure people like me.
Exactly. To speak pure truth, to allow the profound, compassionate energy of the heart to rise up, you must literally sever the intellect. You must cut off the ego-driven head. The rational mind is a bottleneck to higher consciousness.
So the decapitation is a metaphor for getting out of your own way. And the blood.
The blood represents the freed life force, the prana. In yoga, prana is the vital electrical energy of the body. When the constriction of the ego is severed, that life force is finally free to feed the higher levels of consciousness. The entire image is designed purposefully as an ultimate visual shock to short-circuit your rational mind. It bypasses the intellect so you can feel the truth of the practice rather than just thinking about it.
This maps perfectly onto the psychedelic research that Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris discussed on the Huberman Lab. It talks about the default mode network in the brain, which is basically our sense of ego, our autobiography. When people take psilocybin or DMT, the default mode network shuts down. It is a pharmacological decapitation.
Yes, the ego offline.
The ego dies, and suddenly the brain connects in entirely new, hyperfluid ways. Chinnamasta is the ancient software code for shutting down the default mode network.
She is the bridge. And once you cross that bridge, you reach the third eye, the Ajna chakra. Osman links this to Bhairavi. She represents the fierce fire of knowledge. The Sanskrit word is tapas.
And fire burns.
It absolutely burns. Illusions are cozy. Truth is a fire. When you finally begin to perceive the true nature of reality, it brutally burns away all your comfortable lies, your justifications, and your false identities. Bhairavi is the uncompromising clarity that refuses to let you live in denial anymore.
Rick Archer explores this constantly on his podcast, Buddha at the Gas Pump. Rick interviews ordinary people who have had profound spiritual awakenings. And in Rick's interview with Adyashanti, they talk extensively about how awakening isn't always blissful. In fact, it is often a destructive realization that everything you thought you were was a lie.
That's the fire of Bhairavi.
Right. And in Rick's episode with Swami Sarvapriyana, they break down the brutal logic of Advaita Vedanta, which surgically dismantles the illusion of the separate self. And in his interview with Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, they look at the clinical, sometimes terrifying physiological symptoms of Kundalini awakenings, the literal fire of tapas moving through the nervous system.
And if you survive the fire, you reach the crown, the Brahmarandra, the opening at the top of the head. Osman associates this with Bhuvaneshwari, the queen of infinite space. This is the physical exit point. This is where your individual, limited biological energy finally merges with the boundless cosmos.
Gopi Krishna wrote about this extensively, right? He was a normal guy in India in the 1930s who accidentally triggered a massive Kundalini awakening. And his books describe this exact process, the energy rushing to the crown, resulting in a terrifying yet ultimately transcendent merging with the universe.
Notice the progression of this technology. You grounded in the earth at the root. You integrated messy emotions at the sacral. You paralyzed self-doubt at the solar plexus. You embraced the void of grief in the heart. You severed the neurotic intellect at the throat. You burned away illusion at the third eye, and you expanded into infinity at the crown.
Wow.
It is a complete, flawless scientific blueprint for human evolution.
And here is where Osman's framework goes beyond anything we typically talk about in modern wellness. Because he doesn't stop at the physical body. Once you move through the crown, you enter what he outlines as the classical states of samadhi. We are completely off the physical map now. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yes. We are ascending into the purest realms of consciousness, heavily documented by mystics like Ramakrishna and Swami Sivananda from the Divine Life Society. Sivananda wrote volumes on these exact states of mind.
Osman mentions Savikalpa Samadhi, which he links to the goddess Tripura Sundari.
Savikalpa Samadhi is a state of union with form. You are experiencing the ultimate divine beauty and harmony of the universe, but there is still a tiny fragment of the ego left. There is still an observer experiencing the object.
Then you push even further into Nirvikalpa Samadhi. This is formless union. The boundaries completely dissolve. He connects this to Tara, the Savioress, the energy of pure compassion guiding you across the vast, formless ocean of existence.
And at the very end, the ultimate source, the absolute origin point of everything is Mahakali, the great void, the darkness from which all light is born. She exists beyond existence and non-existence. She is the ultimate reality.
It is staggering. These terrifying icons of severed heads and blood, they aren't monsters, they are passwords. They are highly complex software programs designed by ancient spiritual engineers to unlock the highest states of human potential.
But like any advanced technology, it requires an operator who knows how to use it safely.
Exactly. And that brings the focus right back to Osman's daily reality. Because to be an operator of this technology, to hold the voltage required to heal a terminal illness requires unimaginable discipline.
He is very clear about this. His mission is to encourage as many people as possible from these ancient sciences. He has spent his lifetime tirelessly trying to simplify these incredibly complex protocols so everyday people can actually achieve results.
Which is why he gives away so much for free.
Yeah.
He wants to help revive this ancient lost science because he knows it can tremendously improve current society. I mean, we're talking health, peace of mind, relationships, finances. You can literally go to his website, yogawellness786.com, and download a free 5-minute yoga meditation program. 5 minutes.
Incredible.
He also gives away extensive, unique advice and techniques on his YouTube channel, The Blind Muslim Yogi, completely for free. He doesn't withhold the core information.
But there is a clear boundary. The daily maintenance, the 5-minute protocols, that is for you to manage your own baseline. But if you have a severe critical blockage, if you are dealing with a terminal energetic crisis, you need the master operator. And that is why his energy healing service, which is exclusively available on a paid platform, is at a premium level and a premium price.
It makes total sense. You can go to his Patreon channel for paid live daily video online lessons, one-on-one consultations, or group sessions. But when you hire him for an energy intervention, you are paying for the guy who did 18 hours of practice a day for decades. He has influenced and changed many lives for the better, and he has saved countless lives through this applied bioenergetic science.
It bridges the gap perfectly. He respects the medical establishment, he provides free foundational tools for the masses, and he holds the premium energetic space for the critical cases.
So we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with statues of goddesses drinking blood. We traveled down into the bureaucratic politics of the demon worlds. We mapped the human psyche through the chakras, and we broke down the physics of remote bioenergy healing. What is the core takeaway for you as you listen to this?
For me, it is the profound danger of surface-level judgment.
We are so quick to look at something dark, uncomfortable, or terrifying and immediately label it as bad. We just run away from it. But Tantra teaches us that if you run away from the dark, uncomfortable parts of existence, the grief, the fear, the visceral reality of your own body, you are running away from the exact tools designed to liberate you.
Right, the obstacle is the way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Don't judge the scary spoon by its handle. And before we close, if we connect this to the bigger picture, I want to leave you with one final, slightly haunting thought from the source material. We spent all this time talking about the 7 chakras that go up from the root, right? The elevator to the higher worlds.
Right.
But the map doesn't just go up.
Oh, exactly. Osman briefly mentions that in these ancient traditions, there are also 7 chakras below the root, the Tala chakras. These are the downward portals that lead into the lower worlds, into the basement.
Spiritual gravity works both ways.
And that is the question I want you to sit with today. If spiritual technology like yoga and meditation requires active, disciplined, rigorous effort to ascend, what unconscious behaviors are we doing every single day that act as anti-yoga? When we give in to mindless scrolling, unchecked rage, deep addiction, or constant cynical negativity, are we unknowingly opening those lower portals? Are we dragging our own consciousness down into the demonic bureaucracy without even realizing it?
Ascending takes work. Descending just takes gravity.
Keep your awareness sharp. If you want to explore further, make sure you go download that free 5-minute protocol at yogawellness786.com and check out The Blind Muslim Yogi on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us on this massive deep dive. Take care of your energy, keep looking past the surface, and remember, don't be so afraid of the dark.